The morning started out like so many others. Quiet, still, almost ordinary, like a normal day. But I can remember the silence that day. In the moment, it felt different. It wasn't the kind of silence that gives you peace. It was heavy, suffocating, and then it became the kind that makes your chest tighten. Now I realize it was the kind of silence that comes right before your whole world shatters. I didn't know it then, but my life was about to split in two. What do you do when the heartbeat you prayed for, the one you longed for, and built your whole world around, suddenly falls silent? When the dream you held in your arms turns into a nightmare? When the child you thought you'd get to watch grow up is suddenly gone in a single day, just like that? That morning, in that silence, my valley began, and it was darker and deeper than I could ever imagine. But before I walk you through this day, guys, I need to step back for just a moment. Because to really understand the weight of what was lost, you have to know what life looked like right before it happened. The prayers I prayed, the struggles I carried, and the family I had deeply longed for. So let me take you back to the days before the storm. This is Light in the Darkness, and my name is Austin. This podcast is my journey of faith, loss, and hope. And today's episode is the most personal one I'll ever share. It's the story of the day we lost our son, Leo, and how even in that valley, our deepest valley, God began to reveal his presence to us. Like I said, I want to give you a quick glimpse of where I was at in life leading up to it. And so, with that being said, the truth is, my faith was not strong. It wasn't strong at all. I believed in God, sure, but I didn't really walk with him by any means. I wasn't seeking him daily or building a real relationship with him. And because of that, I was restless and distracted. Gambling addiction here and there that was draining me, and an on and off struggle with drinking and smoking marijuana. Those things gave me short bursts of escape that were not even authentic, but they always left me emptier than before. Something I can truly say. At the same time, there was so much shifting around us. My dad, who had faithfully ran our family business for years, was suddenly let go and pushed in a new direction. Not long after, my parents sold our childhood home and moved to Miami. That move felt like, losing the roots we had always known. And in the middle of all of that, I was hit with a completely unforeseen job change, which at the time I really felt unprepared for and was really overwhelmed by. So the point is, there was a lot going on. So there I was carrying stress, fear, and hidden addictions. And yet God had answered my biggest prayers when I didn't have a relationship with him. He gave me a wife, Viviana, who's been one of the biggest blessings of my life. He gave us our son, Leo, and eventually he gave us our daughter, Violet, who I can now see was truly part of our saving grace. So I had everything I thought I wanted. But even then, I lived like something was still missing. Now I can see exactly what that missing piece was. It wasn't another job, more money, more stability, or any new quick escape I tried to fill myself with. What I was missing, guys, was him, God. Up until then, life felt messy but manageable. But all it takes is one day, one morning, for everything you thought was steady to collapse. That day was here. It was on May 17th, 2024. That morning started like so many others. It was really early, probably like around 6:45 or so, 7. Quiet. Just me and Leo are awake. Violet and Viviana were still sleeping, which was typically our routine. He was usually an early riser, and those mornings were our little time together before the day got going. And the night before, I hadn't slept well at all, and my mind was restless. I had so much weighing on me. The situation with my dad being forced out of the family business, my parents selling our childhood home and then moving to Miami, and the weight of a new job I didn't feel ready for. It all left me restless, distracted, and exhausted. I even forgot to do things I never forget. Normally, I was strict about charging my phone, locking the doors, and closing the garage, for example. That night, I had been so stressed, I didn't even plug my phone in. So, early that morning, I went out to the car to grab my charger. And I ended up leaving the garage door wide open. And then I didn't even lock the door from the garage into the house. Something that is usually automatic for me, always. To this day, that detail still haunts me. But it says in Romans 8:1, therefore, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And you guys, I have to cling to that verse because otherwise the guilt would eat me alive. So, brought Leo downstairs with me, made him some breakfast. He wasn't really interested at first, nothing special. Just a normal little routine we had. He ate a little bit, then he played around. I was in the living room. He was going in and out of the playroom. I can still hear the sound of his little feet. And then like the way he would babble and laugh. And how he always wanted to show me the toys he was playing with. Just the simple, ordinary things that seemed so routine at the time. Things I thought I'd have thousands more mornings to experience with him. But that morning, those ordinary moments would be the last. It's strange how when you look back, it's the small details that stick with you. The cereal bowls on the table, the toys scattered across the floor, the way the sunlight came through the blinds in the kitchen. At the time, I thought I was just tired and stressed, trying to push through another day. I didn't realize I was standing at the edge of the darkest valley of my life. And my wife's life as well. The weight of stress, the distraction, the fatigue, it all clouded my mind that morning. And if I'm honest, sometimes I wonder how differently the day could have gone if I had just slowed down or been a little more present or done what I normally did. Those thoughts try to creep in and still try to strangle me at times with guilt, but that's where Jesus steps in and really helps me keep moving forward and ignoring those thoughts. I sat down to type a work email to my boss, giving him an update on the early progress I was trying to make with my new role. And I was sitting on the couch in our living room, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw Leo come back over and wander towards the garage house door. And mind you, Leo was an expert with opening doors, just something he knew how to do really well, despite having autism. And he loved to play with this door specifically because it had one of those little doggy cat flap doors at the bottom. And he would stick his hands through it. And every time he would just giggle. So he just loved coming over and playing with that door. I knew he was over there, but I continued to type. I was determined to get the email done just because it was distracting me. I wanted to get it out the way so I could spend a good morning with him. 10, 15 minutes maybe passed. And that's when I noticed it. That eerie, awkward silence, the kind that makes every parent's heart drop. A strong urge rose up in me telling me to get up now and go check on him. I turn the corner and I see the door wide open. My heart stopped. Panic hit me like a freight train. My first instinct was to run outside. I sprinted down the sidewalk as fast as I could, looking everywhere, screaming his name, praying he would just be a few houses away. Show up, please, just come out somewhere. Nothing. I ran back thinking maybe he had gone inside. Checked every room, looked all over the house. Still nothing. And that's when I realized we have a serious problem on our hands. And I called 911 to let them know what had happened. Violet and Viviana eventually woke up to my shouting. I told Viviana what had happened. We both then ran outside with Violet. I jumped in my car, did a desperate lap around the lake neighborhood, thinking maybe he had gotten further down the street somewhere. Still nothing. When I got back, a few neighbors were outside now. People could tell something was, definitely going on. Looking around, realizing that something was off. As we were heading down the sidewalk, people who lived 2 houses down from us literally just came out of nowhere with the most concerned faces. And they said to us, "We thought we saw something in the water. We're not sure. Maybe a dog." And I remember screaming out, "Wait, what? Why didn't you go check and see? What are you talking about?" And I just ran, took off, sprinting around their house toward the water. Viviana was right behind me. Mind you, at the time, this backyard was not fenced in, so it was fully exposed to the lake that's behind these houses, including ours. Our backyard is fenced in, however. Not to put any blame on these people by any means, just in fact, it's fenced in now, which actually is nice to see. It's just one of those things that kind of stays with you, the what ifs, so to speak. But as soon as I turned the corner, I saw the most haunting image I'll ever remember. There was Leo, out in the water, floating, lifeless. Probably about 10 or 15 feet from the ledge. I jumped in without thinking. Of course, the water was over my head. I couldn't touch the bottom, but I was on pure adrenaline. I tried keeping a Leo above the water, not letting him get any more water ingested in him, holding him as high as I could. I finally got to the ledge, handed him over to Viviana. She laid him on the grass. I then hopped out and then tried to desperately perform CPR on him. And every time I tried to breathe into his mouth, water came back out. His face was pale, clammy. He didn't look good, guys. Let's just put it that way. Paramedics arrived. Basically, the entire street was filled with ambulances and even a couple fire trucks. They took him up to the front yard of this person's house and began trying to work on him for another 20, 25 minutes. I ran over to Viviana, who was standing in the driveway with Violet. She was just in complete shock, as was I. I told her I needed to call my mom, let my parents know, because they were in Miami, so they needed to know. She didn't want me to do it at first, but I said I had to. When my mom answered and I told her what was going on, she immediately began to pray with me on the phone. In that moment, I remember truly believing something miraculous was going to happen while my mom was praying. That Leo was going to be okay and that he was going to wake up. But it wasn't God's will that day. I rode in the ambulance with Leo. Viviana had to get Violet ready and came later in a patrol car to meet me at the hospital. That drive to the hospital felt unreal. Like time wasn't real. Like a nightmare. I asked the driver before we got out, I said, "Is my son going to die?" He looked at me and said, "We're doing everything we can, buddy. They're working on him." Family started arriving at the hospital, grandparents and others, to help us out with Violet and to be there with us. Another 45 minutes passed or so, and the medical team was trying desperately to do everything they could to get a pulse. But nothing. Eventually, a nurse came and called Viviana and me into a private room. That's when we knew. Viviana started screaming, "No, no, no," over and over again. And then the nurse proceeded to say, "I'm so very sorry." She was trying so hard to hold back tears. "I'm so very sorry. We don't think we're going to be able to get him back. I believe your precious son has passed. I'm so sorry." And then all of a sudden, just this huge weight of guilt came attacking me. And we both, Viviana and I, ran out into the waiting room just screaming at the top of our lungs, sobbing. I threw my phone across the room as hard as I could, fell to the ground, with Viviana just bawling her eyes out. My grandfather grabbed my hand saying, "Oh my God, Oz, I'm so sorry, buddy. I know. I've got you, buddy." We went back to the room where Leo was, surrounded by some of our family. We stood there, holding him, hugging him, taking one last look before they had to take him. And then more family and friends showed up to be with us in our grief. At that point, I honestly thought about giving up, though, just because of all the guilt. It was just too much at that time. I remember talking to my mom again on the phone at the hospital, telling her how bad I was feeling. And I don't know if I can continue. I don't know if I can handle this. She begged me, "Please don't do anything stupid, Oz. Promise me you won't do anything stupid." And I told her I promise. Even though deep down, I had felt so low. Eventually, we had to say goodbye to Leo at the hospital and go back home, which was beyond difficult. But again, thank God we were surrounded by family and friends as we got home and for the rest of that day. But gosh, another thing I'll never forget was shortly after we got home, receiving a knock at the door from DCFS, which was a standard procedure after a child's death. They had to rule out foul play. And of course, it didn't take long. But it was just another gut blow, another gut check. Viviana and I had no water, no food at all that day. We were drained, crushed, dehydrated. They made me do a saliva test. My mouth was so dry it took forever to fill the tube, but of course I passed. The rest of that day felt like slow motion. Unreal. Felt like living in a fog. It was like time didn't even exist anymore. My body kept moving, but inside I was completely numb, devastated. My wife as well. Outside of dealing with DCFS, When we got home from the hospital, our home already began to feel not like home. It felt empty. It felt cold. I remember walking in and seeing a bunch of other family members there, crying and waiting for us, giving us big hugs in our living room, and just saying how sorry they were. Viviana and I had no energy left. We were completely checked out. We were drained in every single way possible. But more and more family, friends, and even neighbors began to show up to be there for us and help get us through that day itself. They surrounded us. Truly, I see that as God's presence. And when He began to start revealing Himself to me and to us, not in a booming voice from the sky, but more so in the love of His people. Every hug, every tear, every meal left at our door, every prayer whispered over us, those were glimpses of God holding us together when we were falling apart. And then came the next hard part, planning the funeral, picking out details I never imagined having to choose for my son, who was almost 3 years old. Walking into that visitation and seeing Leo for the last time, that moment for sure broke me, and it broke my wife too. But even then, we weren't alone. We were continued to be surrounded by loved ones who stood with us during our time of grief and never left our side. As hard as those moments were, I thank God for every single one of those people. And you all know who you are. Even for the people that couldn't be there with us and still reached out, thank you. Thank you so much. You guys mean everything to us. The Bible says God is love. And even though we couldn't understand why any of this was happening, I could feel that love through the people He had placed around us. The family, the friends, the church, the neighbors. They were His arms, wrapping around us when ours were too weak to lift. I remember looking at Viviana, both of us shattered entirely, trying to make sense of this all. And Violet was still so little. She didn't understand, but she felt it. She felt the heaviness. And yet she was also this small, living reminder that even in death, God had not abandoned us. The first nights were brutal. Just replaying everything in my mind over and over. The guilt, the what ifs, the sounds of that day echoing like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But in the middle of it, God's grace. Even people we didn't expect showed up, and their love. It was like God whispering, "You are not alone." And it was here, in those very first days, that something new began. In honor of Leo, I started seeking God daily. At first, it was simply me trying to find Him because I was trying to honor my son, since that's who he's with now. He's with the Lord. But over time, the daily seeking turned into something more. It became about saving my own soul and being a testimony. It didn't take away the pain. That's not how it works. But it gave me peace, and it gave me understanding. And it helped me take the next step, to keep going when giving up felt easier, and sometimes still does. Those first few days and weeks were the darkest of my life. I began to sense something. God was there. Maybe faintly, and maybe quietly, but He was there. And that was the beginning of Him slowly revealing His presence in the middle of our deepest loss. The weeks and months that followed, they felt like walking through a valley with no end in sight. You couldn't find the end in this tunnel. Every day I woke up with the same heaviness in my chest, the same questions running through my mind. Why God? Why Leo? Why us? Why? But in that same valley, God began to reveal himself in ways I could not ignore. It was time. At first, it was through the people, the meals, the prayers, the presence of family and friends. But then came what I now call God wink moments, life changing moments, little glimpses of heaven breaking into earth, reminders that he was still with us and that Leo was safe in his arms. Eventually, Viviana and I decided to get away in that early stages of grief after losing Leo with my parents. We went down to Miami with them to try to just get out of the heavy fog of grief, clear our heads as best as we could, survive with each other, and just get through one day at a time. But this is when God began to truly reveal himself in ways I couldn't explain, in ways only he could do, supernatural, powerful ways that touch your soul and never leave you. It was in this part of our pain, our journey, where the first God wink moments began. Little signs and big signs of his presence and reminders that we weren't alone and Leo was safe. It started the very first Sunday we went to church with my mom in Miami. We had no idea what to expect. Everyone was still very down in the dumps, trying to hang on. We just wanted to be in God's house. As the service closed, the final hymn began to play. Amazing Grace came on. I froze. Looked at my mom, looked at Viviana. We all looked at each other with tears in our eyes. That was the same hymnal song I had chosen for Leo's funeral mass, the closing hymnal, in fact. The same hymn that had carried me through this service was now washing over me in a completely different city, unplanned, unprompted. It was like God whispering to us, I'm still here. I'm here. A few days later, earlier in the morning, I was finishing my prayer walk, listening to the Daily Gospel on the Hallow app. As it closed with the Our Father prayer, I turned down the street towards my parents' rental house. There was a homeless gentleman on a bike, and as he passed, he began praying along with my phone out loud. Our eyes met, and I can remember there was something in that moment that felt deeply sincere. I found out he was there to help my dad with yard work. My dad had run into him a couple days before. He began sharing about his hardships, but also about his mission to help others. He then showed me a memorial tattoo of his daughter, who he had lost the previous year in a house fire. I rolled up my sleeve and showed him my tattoo of Leo. When he saw it, he looked down and said softly, "Hey, buddy," as if he already knew Leo. I'll never forget Hebrews 13:2. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. In that moment, I truly wondered if God had sent an angel to me. And then I went to go ahead and get my dad, told him that the gentleman was here, and then I handed him a banana and a water and told him to have a blessed day. And he told me to do the same. I'll never forget it. And to this day, my parents have not seen that man since. The very next morning, I was the first one to wake up. I walk out to the living room of the house we were all staying in, and it had these large glass sliding doors that opened opposite ways. And they were fully open when I walked out. Not cracked or halfway open. The door was entirely open. Sun shining through. And it was just so quiet and still. I stopped and thought for a second, did someone break into the house? I'm looking around trying to see if anything looked like it was just out of place or something was missing. Couldn't see anything or notice anything. In fact, I'd accidentally left my golf clubs and golf bag outside the night before, right next to those doors. And the clubs in the bag, everything was still there. No explanation. I texted my dad in the group family chat asking, are we for sure that we locked the doors and closed them last night? They're wide open. He ended up texting back saying, I for sure locked and closed those doors last night because the door was not locking for me at first, but then I finally got it fixed. So what is this? What is going on here? For the rest of the day, it wouldn't leave me. I could feel it. And then next thing you know, a couple of the devotionals I had subscribed to, the messages for that day were talking about how God's opening new doors for you that no one can close. Or behold, I stand at the door and knock. Just all these references about doors being open. And so then later that night, after reminiscing on that moment for almost the entire day, I decided to pray because I really felt like I was going maybe a little cuckoo, a little crazy, getting in too deep, my overlooking into stuff. So I prayed, asking God to please just give me some clarification here, some confirmation. If this was something I don't need to really look into, let it be known. Or if this is you trying to communicate to me, please let it be known. I need you, please. About a week after we had gotten back home from Miami, our Ring door chimes started going off the entire day. Not one visitor. No visitors, no bad weather, no heavy wind gust. Nothing. Just the doorbell ringing again and again and again throughout the entire day. Around 4:30 p.m., it went off once more, and I remember being in the basement, and Viviana called down from upstairs for me to try and turn it off because it was starting to annoy her, rightfully so. And in that moment, that exact moment, I felt a wave of chills run through my entire body. I remembered my prayer in Miami. Lord, if this is you, give me clarity. And suddenly Revelation 3:20 came to mind. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and eat with him and he with me. It was like God was saying, this is me. I hear you knocking, and I'm opening my door to you. Leo is with me now. I've got him. Keep seeking me, and I will keep my door open to you. That moment was like a divine confirmation. God had heard my prayer, and he was reminding me not to be afraid because he was there with me, right at the front door. And these weren't the only God-linked moments we experienced. There were so many little things that stayed with us and marked my personal transformation. One day, my dad and I walked into one of his favorite vape shops down in Miami, and sitting there was a Kit Kat bar with the name Leo printed on it. I had never seen one like that before. It may seem small to someone else, but for me, it was like a little reminder from heaven. Another time we ran into a stranger at a park. She was with her young son, and in our conversation, I ended up finding out he had autism. She began venting about the long, painful process of waiting lists and struggles that we had walked through with Leo. That conversation felt like anything but random. It was like God was using even that encounter to remind us truly, we are not alone. And the list goes on and on. I have a journal of every single moment. And there are a few. God kept weaving these moments together, big and small, to whisper his presence to us in our deepest pain. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." And I believe that with all my heart because I've lived it. These God wink moments were his way of drawing near when our spirits were crushed. When I look back on that first month after losing Leo, I can see now how God was already moving. Through hymns, through strangers, through open doors, through the little details like a candy bar with Leo's name on it. At the time, I didn't always understand. Some of it scared me. Some of it felt almost too strange to believe. But as I kept praying, as I kept asking God for clarity, as I kept seeking him day by day, I realized he was answering me at his time, piece by piece, moment by moment. These God wink moments were not coincidences. They were reminders. They were love notes from heaven. They were God himself drawing near to us in our pain. That first month didn't take away the grief, but it gave me something stronger than grief. It gave me hope. Hope that God was with us. Hope that Leo was safe with him. Hope that the doors he was opening could never be shut. And that hope would continue to carry us into the next season. A season where we began asking, how do we live in honor of Leo? How do we take our pain and turn it into purpose in honor of him? That's where God began to guide us in ways we never could have imagined. And in the next episode, I'll share some of those steps we took. From autism outreach to building Leo's legacy, and how God opened more doors that no man could close. This is Light in the Darkness, episode 1.1. Thank you for listening today. God bless you.